All praises to the Most High Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rach HaKodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, laboring in this truth in all sincerity. Mark, chapter 3, verses 24 through 26. And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand, but hath an end. And I have a series of videos here I'm going to play. They're all short, but just to kind of take me into today's video topic here. And this is in Minnesota. This is the moment a woman allegedly tried to run over an ICE agent and was shot, and who would later die. She was shot in the face.
Get the fuck out of my neighborhood!
What the fuck? Dude, what the fuck? Dude, you did a murder for what?
That's the first. Here's the second video. And this is the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey. And this is his comments based on the incident that happened with the ICE agent shooting the woman who allegedly tried to run him over.
To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. Somebody is dead. That's on you. This was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying. To the family, I'm so deeply sorry. We're going to be working towards justice as quickly as we possibly can right now. And justice is what we've all got to get. We're going to make sure that in this very difficult moment, we do not take the bait that these ICE agents are trying to create and that the federal government, to be clear, wants.
People are going to want to exercise their First Amendment rights, but please do so safely and lawfully to ensure that we do not have any further tragedy in this city or destruction.
We can show them the kind of courage, bravery, love, and compassion that makes Minneapolis. Let's unite around hope and love and peace and getting justice.
The next video is the governor of Minnesota, former vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, who, if you may recall, was just in the middle of some fraud allegations. He himself may not have actually been the one frauding, but the tens of billions of dollars that have come up so far missing, he has presided over the state during this time, and it has been alleged that he kind of turned a blind eye to a lot of it because he may have been getting paid off himself, allegedly. So this is Tim Walz's thoughts on what took place as well today.
And from here on, I have a very simple message. We do not need any further help from the federal government. To Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, you've done enough. There's nothing more important than Minnesotan safety. I've issued a warning order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. We have soldiers in training and prepared to be deployed if necessary. I remind you, a warning order is a heads up for folks. And these National Guard troops are our National Guard troops. They're teachers in your community. They're business owners. They're construction professionals. They are Minnesotans. Minnesota will not allow our community to be used as a prop in a national political fight. We will not take the bait. We will continue to update you, Minnesota, as we get more information.
And this is Nero himself, and this is a screenshot of a comment that was on his, I believe, his X or Twitter page here. I have just viewed the clip of the event which took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is a horrible thing to watch. The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator, and the woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, who seems to have shot her in self-defense. Based on the attached clip, it is hard to believe he is alive, but is now recovering in the hospital. The situation is being studied in its entirety, but the reason these incidents are happening is because the radical left is threatening, assaulting, and targeting our law enforcement officers and ICE agents on a daily basis. They are just trying to do the job of making America safe. We need to stand by and protect our law enforcement officers from this radical left movement of violence and hate. President Donald J. Nero Trump. So this is just a quick video here. This is the scene now in Minneapolis. You can see the Black Hawk choppers circling around the city now. And this is the National Guard preparing to be deployed. As you can see, the individual here type, things are getting very tense out there. And this here is I had the victim. Let's see if I can find that again. Someone took it down. This page doesn't exist. Try searching for something else. Okay, so what that was just now, what I was attempting to show was the alleged victim, the woman who allegedly tried to run over the ICE agent, as well as her being shot in the face. And on that particular website, it did say that she was a mother, a wife. Her pronouns were her or she or something to that effect, with the LGBT flag in that profile. So for whatever reason, they took it down, which is not a huge deal. I didn't plan on going into the video itself. This video is not to determine as to whether or not the shooting was justified, just to go into prophecy itself. But I have one last video here that I'll show.
Bob, I want to jump in here. I want to ask you where you're at right now. And we're seeing the images on the screen. There's that flag you were talking about being burned here. What kind of things are they shouting? The crowd that's out there, I know they're obviously not happy ICE is there. They've been talking about that. What are they saying? You know, what's the energy like where you are right now?
So that's one reason why I'm not getting too close, so I can hear all of you, because it is loud out here. It's profanities, a lot of profanities against ICE.
And this was a meme that I came across as I saw some of these videos. Someone in the comment section stated, well, they put up this meme, what a year this week has been. And that is indeed true. What a year this week has been. We are only roughly, if I'm correct, today is the 7th. We are 7 days, 1 week into the new year, 2026. And it started off with the U.S. invading Venezuela, capturing and removing their sitting president along with his wife. Both China and Russia, along with a host of other nations, including the UK, all voiced their displeasure. Afterwards, Nero started threatening Colombia and Cuba with the same type of action. Then we have Nero threatening to invade Iran and Greenland, with NATO basically stating that that would severely weaken the relationship between the U.S. and NATO if the U.S. was to invade Greenland. And now we have this ongoing situation right here in Minnesota, in this country. And this is actually finding out, right after finding out tens of billions of dollars have been lost in various fraud schemes across that particular state. Now we have an ICE agent shooting a woman with a bullet to the face, leaving her dead at the scene. So there's several different angles of that particular video in slow motion if anyone wants to see it. But like I stated earlier, the viewers of that particular video can make their own decision, their own determination as to whether or not that shooting was justified. This video will only focus on the biblical prophecy that surrounds it, what's going on in Minnesota right now, and which will eventually start spreading from city to city and state to state, and what the scriptures say about insurrection, martial law, and civil war. And as we started off with the chapter, I believe that was Mark chapter 3. If a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And I'll go back to that. Yes, that was Mark 3:24. And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And that's what we're seeing right now. And if Satan rise up against Satan, as it says in verse 26, and be divided, he cannot stand, but hath an end. And that was the reason why I wanted to show the alleged victim in this particular case. This was at the time they were showing a so-called white woman with red and pinkish type hair, the the alphabet flag in her profile, but that has since been removed. So maybe it was a mistake. I don't know. Like I said, as I was preparing this, I did not realize they had removed that particular video with her profile. So we're getting a lot of tough talk from the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota. And we already know Nero is not going to sit back and just allow that. He's your classic narcissist who will not allow himself to be overshadowed by those he feels are lesser than him. He's a shit talker. That's what he does. So a huge part of this kingdom divided, is basically your right-wing conservative so-called whites, and they're against your liberal progressive, left-wing so-called whites as well. So, and I will say one thing regarding this, the liberal progressive white woman, she's definitely in the MVP conversation as it pertains to who has played the biggest role in helping to destroy Babylon. And I'm just being honest when I say that. All you have to do is just check her voting record, her being a big advocate of feminism. She's a huge advocate and proponent of abortion, choosing her career over family, etc. Basically all the stuff that the so-called black woman has adopted from her. But it's really weakened the Edomite male in this country. So-called black Americans were already at the bottom, when the so-called black woman adopted those philosophies. But the so-called white woman is actually helping to knock the so-called white man from his position of power right here in Babylon over the past 6 decades. And, a lot of this is agenda based, and, there are outside nations who have a lot of influence over this particular country as well. But for the most part, this is all through the power and spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, how the so-called white woman is being used to knock the so-called white man from his position of power in this country. And if that particular video that I wanted to show that was taken down, if that particular video is true and that was the victim, you're basically going to see, because best believe if this was a so-called black woman, or if this was even a Somali, they would have never taken that down as fast as they took that down. As I was preparing this and had it ready to go, by the time I tried to play it, it was already removed. And that's probably because the victim was probably a so-called white woman. A so-called white woman who's has taken on the liberal and progressive ideologies. And now you have her, putting up resistance to an ICE agent trying to flee the scene. She was shot in the face, and then, they took her out basically by doing that. And now you're about to see an entire whole insurrection probably kick off because of that. And that's like I was stating, the Most High Yahweh Bashem and Hawashai is basically used this woman here, the so-called Edomite woman, the Edomite woman indeed, I should say. And he's used them these past 60 years to like really help weaken the Edomite male in this country. And, a lot of that comes down to, let's go to our second Esdras 15 and 21 there. And like as they do, yet this day unto my chosen, so will I do also in recompense in their bosom. Thus saith Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. And let's also take a look at Deuteronomy 30 and 7. And Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. And the reason why I wanted to go to those two scriptures, based on what I was just stating about the white woman in this country being used to help bring down this country and to bring down the so-called white man from his position of power, is because all of the things that they try to do to the black woman in this country in terms of using her to break up the family structure in the so-called black community, that's being done right now by white women. And you can best believe when Margaret Sanger introduced Planned Parenthood, the last thing she was thinking in Babylon would be that white women would account for close to 40% of those abortions annually. And that's just here. That's not even including, what's the abortion numbers in Europe as well, which is pretty much showing you that this is why their birth rates are going down all over the world. So you put something in place that was supposed to really truly only affect the tribes here, but white women in their quest for power, to obtain power and to gain a leg up on their own men, this is all turned against them, just like it says here. And Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. So, I'm not going to really go off on a tangent about that. I want to really stay on topic about what's happening in Minneapolis and Minnesota right now. But just wanted to bring that out as it pertains to this civil war, because the so-called white woman in this country is playing a huge part in this particular country going down. And right now we are on the brink of civil war, and a lot of it has to do with this kingdom being divided, and it's divided between conservatives and liberals. But that's just one piece of the division here. There's several other divisions in this country, but for the most part, that's almost a 50-50 split there, or it's something like maybe 43-57 or 55-45, but it's a very close number between the number of white men and women who are progressive and liberal, and they're voting how they go out there and vote, versus the conservative white men and women. If they were unified, none of this would be happening. If they were mainly voting for conservatism, a lot of this would not be taking place right now. So a lot of that divide in this country spiraling towards civil war here has a lot to do with the role that the so-called white woman and the gay white male as well, because he's playing a serious part in it also. But really, the so-called white woman is really playing an integral part in destroying this place, or at least helping to destroy this place and to weaken it or bring it down ultimately before it's totally destroyed, I should say. And but like I said earlier, we saw in the previously played videos how the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota are speaking real boldly against Nero, along with some other liberal politicians and media personalities. So let's go to 2 Esdras 15 and 16 and see what it says there. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their action shall stand in their power. I'll read that one more time. 2 Esdras 15 verse 16. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their action shall stand in their power. And like I said, that's here you have a sitting president, and he's basically at odds with the mayor of a fairly large city in this country, Minneapolis, and the sitting governor of the same particular state. So they're speaking out against him. And there's also, there's politicians all over this country. There's media personalities all over this country speaking out against Nero right now, because a lot of them think that Nero is he's tripping. He's doing what he's always done. This is the same exact way he was 2,000 years ago. If you understand that through the power and spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, this is Nero back in the reincarnation. He's picking up where he left off last. This is the same thing he was doing over 2,000 years ago. It's what he's doing again right now. So, you hear Tim Walz talking, and he is the governor of Minnesota. So one of his powers as governor is that he has control over the state National Guard. I mean, he can try to activate the guard. That's one of his tools that is one of his tools that he has at his disposal. But ultimately, Trump can invoke the Insurrection Act. And those same National Guardsmen that Tim Walz is trying to activate, Trump can kind of supersede him and invoke the Insurrection Act. And that would actually federalize those National Guardsmen, putting them under Trump's control, not the governor's control. So plus we also have to remember, sometime last year, if I'm correct, and I think I saw it was April, the month was April of last year. Okay. Donald J. Nero, Trump has not given officers absolute immunity from prosecution. However, as president, he signed an executive order in April 2025 that aims to strengthen legal protections for law enforcement officers, and has repeatedly promised on the campaign trail to grant police officers broad immunity from prosecution and civil liability. So Trump was already seeing all this was going to be playing out like this. So last year, maybe 3 or 4 months after he took his oath for the presidency, he already kind of knew what he planned on doing, which is why he, put out this executive order, basically, giving them some sort of immunity from prosecution and civil liability, as it states here. So this particular officer, he may not even get punished for this. And that's, if you're curious enough to want to watch those videos and make your own determination as to whether or not he was guilty or justified in that shooting, that's on, anyone can do that. But like I said, I wanted to mainly focus on the prophecies here and how it pertains to Babylon collapsing. But something to keep in mind here, Trump has already kind of given this guy, the officer involved, the ICE agent involved, he kind of gave him a way out when he put in this executive order, and he's giving them all a way out, so they have the right to use that type of force and really not have to worry about prosecution or civil liability, so we're seeing these things shape up here. And Trump, as of right now, looks like he's covered a lot of bases here. So, if nothing else, you hear them say it in the media a lot. Trump is playing, I think they're saying 3D or 4D chess or something like that. I'm not really too familiar with the term that they've been using, but it does look like he's one step ahead of everybody right now. So, and that is interesting that, last year, April, he did do that. And so this executive order, it says, the order titled Strengthening and Unleashing American Law Enforcement to Pursue Criminals and Protect Innocent Citizens directs the Attorney General to create a mechanism to provide legal resources and indemnification to officers who unjustly incur expenses and liabilities for actions taken during the performance of their official duties. This includes maximizing federal resources to expand legal protections for officers and provide them with private sector pro bono legal assistance. So like I said, it does look like Trump is moving one step ahead of everybody else. So things are getting real interesting here. And, Trump started off, Nero started off with ICE going after the northern tribes, along with Levi as well, so, And we all know eventually Nero is going to go after Judah. He really hasn't gone after the so-called Black American, at least not publicly. You know, we don't know what he might be saying or planning behind closed doors, but we all know it's coming eventually. That is inevitable as per the scriptures. You know, Jacob's trouble is real, you know, so we do know through the power and spirit of Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai that yes, this may be starting off with, you know, the northern kingdom, Levi. This may even go a little bit, you know, him going after Hamites and Cushites in Minnesota with the Somali community and stuff like that. But eventually it's going to turn towards Judah. And if he, you know, invokes this insurrection act, then that's going to give him a lot of power. And, you know, it's something that we just know is about to happen. So let's take a look at 2nd Esdras 16 and 70. For there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai. You know, so we're getting closer and closer to that time. You know, the time of Jacob's trouble is approaching, but we know these things have to happen in order for a more righteous kingdom to be established here on earth. So I'll close it out with Isaiah 19, verses 2 through 4. And, you know, you really can't do anything but praise the Most High Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai for giving us these prophecies and allowing us to be able to interpret the times through his word. So with that being said, I'll close out here with Isaiah chapter 19, verses 2 through 4 NLT. I will make Egyptian fight against Egyptian, brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, city against city, province against province. The Egyptians will lose heart, and I will confuse their plans. They will plead with their idols for wisdom and call on their spirits, mediums, and those who consult the spirits of the dead. I will hand Egypt over to a cruel master. A fierce king will rule them, says Yahweh Bashem and Yahweh Shai, the Lord of heaven's armies. I pray this has been edifying and reaches the ears it's supposed to reach. Shalom.